the meeting with prayer, pledge of allegiance, and the reading of oath. This will be done by one of our members, Jeff Garden.
The serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Let's all turn to basic flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our stability pledge. I pledge to build a stronger and more prosperous community by advocating for civil engagement, respecting others and their viewpoints, and finding solutions for the betterment of my family.
I apologize for the appearance of my face in general, but in particular tonight, I've had a interaction with a dermatologist, which when you've got light skin and blue eyes happens as you age. And all I can say is to make sure your children wear sunscreen. The message from your doctor is over for tonight. But I call the meeting to order. Starting from the end there is James Gardner. Then Kelly Casino. Then Jeff Hardy. And my name's J.D. Costa. We are 4 of the 5. We constitute quorum. Obviously, we can have tie votes tonight where normally we couldn't. Sitting on my far right is Dan O'Hara. And he is our planning manager and extremely valuable to us, and will have significant input into the meeting tonight. On my other side is our clerk, Neil White, who is Dan's right-hand person, and our administrator, who's kind enough to come as a guest to all of our meetings, and is our expert in Robert Rules of Order. If she had a long ruler, she'd slap my hands with great frequency. But anyway, we will proceed on. I would entertain a motion to review the minutes of the January 20th and 27th meetings.
So move.
Second. Discussion is open. Anybody have any suggestions?
I have a couple for the January 20th minutes. On the first page, it's very minor, but the paragraph at the bottom of the page. It says that there are a few written comments that were submitted in writing, which is redundant, so either remove written or remove in writing. Another minor one on page 2 under E, new business, item A. That second paragraph, Mr. Cruz's last name doesn't have an E. It's correct in the other place in that. Following page. Just above B, where it says the chairman then moved on to agenda item EB and mentioned the longest moratorium in South Carolina. I think that you had said it was Mount Pleasant, Charleston County.
Charleston, yes.
Okay, so the minutes just say Charleston, it applies to Charleston, City of Charleston. And that's all I have for the.
I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the 20th.
So move.
All in favor?
Second.
Second. Good. All in favor? All opposed. Okay, Kelly, the 27th.
Yes, hold on, let me get there.
I use that strong.
It starts, well, I don't know, you're saying.
15 or 48.
15.
Mine document.
The only note I have here was on. Let's see, it's page 17 of 48. I'm not sure what number that is, but under old business, item A, when we talked about plan development regulations. So the minutes don't reflect the changes that we made during the meeting. So my concern is that a member of the public got the draft that had the revisions in it and they saw that. And if you read the minutes, it just looks like we approved those revisions and didn't make any additional ones during the meeting. So my recommendation would be that the minutes be revised to reflect those specific additional edits we recommend.
I would agree. We'll be seeing the. At the last meeting, I and Jay, put in our 2-sentence additions, which we agreed to put in. On issues that, that we read before the committee. Now they're officially in the document, and we will have it so that everybody can make sure that what we said was like really in writing. And it is. But we will see it as well as public.
Yeah, and if it's easier to just make that an addendum to the, or an attachment to the
Right, well,
minutes.
that was actually the plan to attach it as an addendum
Okay.
because some of the noted changes were homework for you guys. I
Right.
know you had one, Jay had one, JD had one, and I didn't want to state those changes when I didn't have those to supplement to this,
That makes
these minutes.
Yeah.
That's why when I sent the email out, I noticed, I tried to preface it to let you guys know that I went through, I actually listened to this meeting 4 times, an hour and 40 minutes. And I had all the fine details, but the edits that you guys would send to Dan,
Yeah,
I didn't have those to add in as a supplement to this, so the pages were accepted, but. you know,
Okay, got it next time.
yeah.
Yeah,
So how do we proceed from here in terms of motions? Can we vote to accept it as written, knowing when the amendment's coming, or we should wait on it, defer it?
you can accept it accept it and add it as an addendum to these minutes. So the changes would be added as an addendum to these minutes, so your motion would be to approve the minutes to, and with the supplemental additions that were the edits from.
At a later date, for us to see, or you just have?
Well, I believe Dan may have them now, since he's already received all of the information from you guys, so then he can give me his document that I can add as the addendum to this.
I'm comfortable doing it that way, if y'all.
I'm comfortable. It's
Yeah.
exactly what we said.
I listened 4 times.
Riker is going to get a casino on one of his sentences, but
Yes,
we'll let it slip past.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry if I missed that in your email, that explanation. in your
it
email.
really is whatever you guys wanna do, but it gets kind of hairy when you don't have all of the details to add in.
Yeah. agree.
That's good.
Okay, I make the motion that we accept the minutes with the addendum. Second, all in favor? Done. All right. We are now moving on to the public comment section of this meeting, and all of our meetings are run the same. The public has 25 minutes, each person has 2 minutes, which you will observe, and if at the end, there's no one else who wishes to speak, then there's 0 minutes left, the person can speak a second time. This is not a public hearing, so we will not have a give and take between the committee and the audience. You will address me, not members of the staff or the specific committee members. There will be public hearings on all 3 of these ordinances tonight, which there will be a free give and take. That will probably be run by council because all 3 of these ordinances originated from council, not the student. All right, so go ahead.
If anyone would like to submit public comment, please raise your hand and we can acknowledge.
Well, come on up, we'll just start on that side, and move on across. Everybody will have a chance.
I'm John Brubaker, 600 Flatfield Farm Road, Allendale. Chairman, I'll support, I appreciate the opportunity to address you. And I thank you and your staff and your other members and the town staff for the significant improvements that have been made to all 3 of these ordinances. And I hope that you find them acceptable and that they pass our town council. Specifically with regard to the weapons, I hope that we appreciate the value of the weapons in our neighborhood, both to the natural and anthropogenic communities here. It's rare to find a 10-acre plot in our town that does not have 2 or 3 wetlands on it. And I can't understand how the wetland delineators overlook those small wetlands as they do their delineations. But I understand it's job security. But with that in mind, I hope that we continue to recognize the value of those water sources so critical to us, and don't let down our efforts to continue to improve that ordinance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am. Not you, ma'am.
I'm Krista Mack, and I live at 8675 Door Road. And I just wanted to make a public comment about the 35 or the setback going to 75 feet. I currently live on Allendale Creek. There is no verbiage in this that if something should happen to my current home, it should burn down, if it should get hit by a hurricane, or if it should be collapsed or an earthquake, that I would be able to rebuild my house. And I think that unless and until we do a study on how many residents are going to be affected by this ordinance, you know, I think that more study needs to be available to it. My personal belief is that we're overstepping personal property rights by greatly expanding this to those of us who have already lived here and resided here, which I have for over 10 years. And I think we're opening up the town to lawsuits, and I don't know that we'll be able to afford to pay. So that's concerning. So, you know, my hope is that we would still continue to tuck under the county and the state, because that's a protection against lawsuits. And it will allow most of us who live on the Creek or the intercoastal or back up to the Francis Marion Forest, which is a setback, I think over 100 feet. You know, it needs to be in consideration of those of us who want to.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir.
Thank you. My name is Justin Westlake. I live at 6818 CB Road, just down the road here. And I want to touch on a little bit, but this movement had talked about the wetlands going to this 75 plus the 15. It's really affecting a lot of people in town. Our surveyor, E.M. Seabrook, has done a lot of work for this town, has, you know, gone, marked a lot of stuff here. He was never given any kind of update that this was ever going to be happening. So in the process of us applying for our little subdivision, and all we wanted to do was subdivide for an acre for a family member and a couple acres for our son. And with this new wetland thing, we pretty much lost almost all of that property that we can develop on. So we were just hoping that maybe you guys can, when we come to the board with our plans, just a little for these guys in the neighborhood in the area. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
So we're husband and wife, and just to add a little bit to that and not to be over redundant, I'm Val, by the way. We've moved there for about 3 years or so. I have a business and we moved out in Allendale to really give our son, he's a Southern boy. I'm definitely not a Southern, my husband is not, but our son is a Southern boy, born and raised here. We have a total of 25 acres. So I find it highly, almost difficult to comprehend that it's something as simple as giving our son 2 acres of land and another family member an acre of land. It's taken over 6 months. And we got stuck in the middle of this process. And we moved here because it's a small town and everybody cares and everything is kind of processed more on a structural level and really looking at individually versus a sweep over of pretty much making acres of our property that we just purchased within 3 years ago unusable. And basically make our son, not have an option as discussed with you. All given and processed, all our processes were done with instruction from your team members, whether they were previous or current. So it needs to be. We understand, as you're saying, that, wetlands are very important to this area. But there's got to be a little bit more studies done into it and really look at how it's affecting people at the end of the day. Because whether, if it's a, 50 properties being put in 10 acres, I would definitely, there's a problem. But if you're seeing 2 properties being put on, and making more than half of the property that we just purchased in the last 2 years useless, I definitely do see as a huge problem. And it's affecting lives. It's affecting lives. It may be a stroke of a pen for you all that you do good or bad, like how do you all feel, but it's definitely affected us financially tremendously. And I know it may not be something nice to hear, but it's definitely affected us. And we definitely will be here within the next month for a solution.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Mark Beasley, 56 Grand Lane. On a couple of ordinances, I mean, with the previous 2 people spoke, totally agree with them that y'all will be overstepping a lot of people's land use rights. Your number one is you're gonna be affecting a lot of the heirs properties and stuff that hasn't been subdivided yet, that backs up to the national forest. And even the wetlands on the intracoastal waterway where I can tell you a couple members of council and the mayor's house will be affected by this if their house is demolished by a hurricane or a storm. Because you have a 215-foot setback, most people don't understand. And I don't think most of the public understands what y'all are pushing through. And you're gonna affect a lot of people and hurt a lot of people's land use rights, okay? And that's gonna probably create some legal issues for the town. I mean, I can tell you, my house myself, if it gets demolished in a hurricane or storm, I hope y'all have something grandfathered in there for existing properties. But if you don't, that is a big issue for a lot of people. Oh, I mean, several people that are, like I said, on the council and the mayor's house will be in that setback area that will not be rebuilt. I don't know, so, I would recommend that we follow the current policy that's in place for a reason. It's been around for 50 years. But 115-foot setback plus a 215-foot setback. That goes, I read it, it's 100-foot plus an additional 100-foot if you're up to a conservancy area or a protected wetland area or a protected area, and then add the 15-foot on top of that. So that's 215 foot. Y'all will be destroying a lot of people's private property rights. Must make it.
Thanks, sir. Man, you were late. We let talk.
Well, that often happens. Just to echo what I just heard, what I saw coming in, yes, it will affect, Deer's property. The wetlands, it will affect a lot, so I would just ask that you all look at this. Make sure that we understand what we're doing to folks who have Deer's property, whose stuff has not been subdivided. Fortunately for my family, yeah, my stuff has been subdivided, but I do have an acre of property that will be affected by this because it's sitting near the water, and also, when you look at the delineation line, that piece of property, my niece may not be able to build on that piece of property. So I just ask that you hear what we're saying, hear what these folks are saying. It's going to affect a lot of people and just not the folks that live in coastal water. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, your last one here, do you have anything to say? No. How are you?
Yeah.
Anybody want to talk for the second time? Or are we done? 5 minutes. You've had a fairly consistent message. Is there any message?
I'm curious, how was this, honestly, where was the
Asking the council, that's where it came from.
And how that, I'm curious, I mean, I apologize if I sound stupid, but, I've never had to deal with this before. Where, were the studies done to actually prove that
This
this
is
is
not, this is
beneficial?
not back and forth, this is us listening to you.
they're not.
Right, I'm just curious, like where, where would we find where those studies were done to actually support what you guys are trying to pass?
Thank you.
But they're not gonna answer you.
No, I understand, have those things.
Yes, sir.
It says I. Did I speak? No. Thank you. I'm down to the outlier here. OCRM has done a lot to come up with the parameters that you all are wrestling with. When I worked with OCRM on, and DNR on the Hammock Islands survey to keep those from being developed. OCRM at Fort Johnson was of the opinion that this area could never be developed out as a residential community because of the nature of the land. Now, people have done that. The town has not stood in the way of that until recently. But it is the right thing to do for the best condition for the residents and the natural area on into the future, looking, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I say one more thing? Where are we?
6.2.
Well, those are OCR, it's 35 foot, correct? That's what we have. That's what's noted operational for wetland setback for X amount of years. Town of Mount Pleasant struggled to get 50 foot. We're saying 115 foot or 215 foot, or y'all's guidelines that were put out. I'm just letting the public know that. Hopefully everybody's gonna listen to this on YouTube. It will affect a lot of property in this town, a lot of people in this town. And I hope y'all can respect that in the council. It will have a big far reaching effect on a lot of properties on the intercoastal. And like I said, there's in a lot of the black population that backs up to the borders. That's how they live. They pass it on to their family and separate bigger tracts of land. I have a lot of friends that are there. I know. So it's going to affect a lot of people. That's all I can say.
Seeing no further comments, I would like to call the meeting's meeting to an end, and I would like to begin the new business, which is going to take the rest of the speed. First one is ordinance 2026-05 and deals with water and sewage disposal. May I have a motion to open this for discussion?
So move.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Here we go, folks. Ready? Okay, let me see. We are calling, private water systems, all AKA wells. The lots of 30,000 square feet, remember that's 0.69 acres. Making changes are in our drain fields, and we are going to be allowing the possibility of advanced treatment options. In other words, engineered, which has to meet a certain state statute. And there are folks certified for that, but they are not cheap, but that's what this is, an engineered system, the tier 3 installer and it's standard 610 if you want to look at the state code. Our problem is essentially this, it should be in your packet. we have city water coming up Allendale Creek. It is not a river, it is a creek according to the geodetic survey. And so we have no rivers in this town except one go, it's 15-mile road. But as you're closer to water, you have salt water undermining and pushing up your groundwater there. So those who are near water and love being near water have much less leeway on their septic systems than people who are further away from them. In South Carolina, conventional septic systems are really compromised with poor soil, high water tables, limited space. So I call them Department of Environmental Science Services, which are the ones that basically do our quick tests. Talked to their director, really nice guy named Josh. And he said, let me see, oh my God, poor soil, high water tables. Have I missed anything? I went, no, you haven't. And he proceeded to tell me how they work our place and what they think we can do and what we can't do. Smaller lots are going to be problematic, particularly because we have relied on septic systems. Groundwater is a blessing for many people, which takes care of some of that issue. In places where you have to have, there's a new state regulation that the wells and septics have to be 75 feet apart. When I built and when most of you built, it was 50. Now it's 75. So you take your well and you take your septic, it's got to be 75 feet apart. And then you look at your neighbor and then your other neighbor, and they all have to be in that pattern. So getting lots underneath a third of an acre in a system like that is not feasible. You can't do it. So now the facto from the state, you would be dealing with larger lots. If you do not have city water, if you have city water, all you got to worry about is 75 feet. Okay. Poverty loan issue. All right, so
Point of clarification,
Yeah.
the ordinance would only be affecting newly subdivided lots after the passage of this ordinance. It would not affect current lots as it stands.
no ordinance we are talking about is retroactive.
I was just making that known, so it's when you're reading it for this specific subsection of our code of ordinances, it is for our newly subdivided lots, and staff has the report too that can go into a little bit more basis on that, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Can you show me where you're pointing?
If you're looking at online, it's page 22 of 48. It's right after the proposed ordinance, and all of the amendments, when you're looking at it, the edits are in red, and then anything that's being removed is stricken through.
You're not everybody's grandfathered in any of the new ordinances that we put in. And what's been brought up by the audience is if there's a 50% more destruction of your dwelling than you want to rebuild, then you have to meet the new criteria. So that's what's being cited by numerous of the.
Just point of clarification on that one, that should pertain to a different ordinance, not the septic
Not
regulations.
the septic rate.
Correct.
Because probably if your septic's destroyed, we're gonna have a real problem. Anyway, so none of this is retroactive. That includes everything you're going to be hearing. All right, so let's start with you. Our engineer, as one of our engineers who's not here. What do you think, Jack?
Just for my clarification, what is our vertical clearance now? Is it 8 inches?
Presently, it's the minimum state requirement, which is 6 inches.
6 inches across the board, yes.
Go to 12 for systems without advanced treatment, and as I identified a few items in my staff report, there are some definitions that need to be added. That was one that I was hoping to have an open discussion with the commission on what we would like to see advanced treatment to be. The goal of engaging and including advanced treatment technology is to have a better end result between the filtering of the effluent. So to promote that that system or a system with advanced treatment. You can look a lot of different ways with chemical injection or fabric wall or different mechanisms within inside. But I think the beginning, having a broad term of a system that is assisted to treat the effluent, if it's more advanced than a regular gravity fed system.
So if we do advanced treatment, we can have less than 12 inches of vertical thing.
As proposed presently, yes, it would go from 12 inches, so it would be an additional 6 inch offset. And to system with advanced treatment, it would revert to a total of 8 inch offset, additional 2 inch off the state minimum.
Which is still 2 inches more than we have now. With the 6 inches is the state
Right.
rate. So we're not going below 6 inches, but what we're doing with engineered systems, we're allowing people with higher water tables on their property to still use their property and put in a septic system. That's what engineered systems are for. No other reason. It's to allow you to use the land, which is marginal for septic.
Right, and a point of clarification there, this ordinance looks at all septic systems. It does not look at engineered versus non-engineered individually. It is a comprehensive on any septic system that could be permitted here in Alton. These would be the requirements through subdivision application that would be put on any new lots created, as indicated in 3 of the ordinance. Currently, the effective date would be July 1st, 2026. Any new subdivided lots, so applied after July 1st, 2026, those lots would need to meet these new requirements.
So the 12A.
Currently, are we allowed to have drain fields in some of the setback?
Yes.
So that's a big change.
But that doesn't come until the third ordinance that we're talking about today, am I correct?
That would be this septic ordinance that we were talking about, right? So 2026 dash zero.
Sub
Oh,
3.
I see, yeah, sorry, yeah, I was mixing up my ordinances, alright.
So the intent behind this ordinance was to prevent a drastic measure of restricting one type of system over another and looking at more comprehensive best land management practices. I've engaged with DES, 3 design professionals, the Rural Water Association, National Rural Water Association, Clemson Extension, Sea Grant to talk about septic ordinances and regulations and how to promote more sustainable development, since septic is our only option here in town. It's imprudent that we think about these in a broad sense versus looking at engineered versus non. For every reason that's in my staff report, one being DES now requires any subdivisions of 10 lots or more to be certified by a design engineer or a soil classifier, which ultimately would get put in an engineered category. That system could be a conventional system for all intents and purposes, but it's just stamped by an engineer. So if, for this ordinance, I think it's best for us to stay in a broad sense and look at land management, and through further study and management policy, we can talk more finite systems.
Because there are a lot of engineered systems currently in one just because if the perk doesn't look good, DES is going to say, go get yourself an engineer. And so we have a lot of systems and putting people on council. So there's nothing wrong with the idea. An engineered system can be nothing more than just using really good sand in your septic field rather than the clay that we got around here.
When you say advanced treatment, is that a third and separate thing when compared to the conventional and the engineered as it's drawn out here?
As it was explained to me by a third party design professional who used to work for DES, a conventional system can have advanced treatment technology in it. It's just a matter of if it's installed in that system.
So as written, this first 12-inch offset, the addition of 6 inches applies to conventional and engineered,
Correct.
and only the advanced treatment is a lesser option.
Correct. So that models, North Carolina, the state, they have that requirement. And speaking with a few design professionals, they recommended that metric. I talked to DES about it. The state might have more stricter regulations. Those changes, would result in a higher water quality, but, some individuals, we may see that they have to do more reoccurring maintenance to obtain their warranty. So, with this, I think there should be a lot of consideration on what new regulations would affect to our current residents or new residents. As this would affect new subdivisions.
Sorry, you're the one.
Well, I guess just reading this, one of my concerns is that we've now can't put wells in a setback. Can't put drain fields in setbacks. So, and our setbacks can get larger, and our separation from 50 feet to 75 feet. So our building path's getting really small at this point.
And I imagine half the lots in town aren't gonna be buildable anymore. That was just a generalized guess, but I would imagine at least 25% of the lots that we have now will be buildable. And again, this only applies to newly done lots, right? But what about the people who have property? I don't mean you can take your time on this fire. I mean, there's probably at least several, but probably many families who have lots, and this is gonna be the same that I'm gonna say for every one of these things, that this is their retirement plan. This is what they're planning on doing. They're gonna turn this into some houses for their families, turn this into some houses to sell, whatever it might be. And these seem so overly restrictive, all three of these things that are coming up here today, that it seems out of control. I mean, when we're looking at Ayers property, they're 75 feet now between well and septic, plus you can't even use the setback. That's the whole lot taken down to a small little dot, and there's no way that people are gonna be able to do stuff on it.
You got the ordinances to, where other counties are, what we want to offer us and what.
No, I'm wondering how the setbacks, I doubt that that's in many. Or I don't know, how many other places around town have this no wells and septic in your setback thing, is that?
There are some communities that do require stricter regulations. I believe Berkeley County just increased their lot requirements. Of course, the town of Hollywood has a prohibition on septic, but they have centralized sewer, or a prohibition on engineered septic, excuse me. But they have centralized sewer to offset that additional restriction. And it is well taken on the setback requirements. I think the intent of the ordinance is to promote more sustainable land management. So to avoid someone from putting a drain field adjacent property line 5 feet away, and let's say that drain field fails, and now someone has a fluid in their backyard. The town currently doesn't have any parameters to prevent that, and then, no one wants a fluid in their backyard.
Right.
And so, in theory, what these would do is to promote more responsible land management. We're looking at requiring an undisturbed buffer area for the entire install of these lots to prevent any manufactured adjustment of where the drain field is gonna be. And that would be, C. Yeah, so that was something that I discussed with the soil classifier. There's a lot of discussion about the engineered septic systems and how they're influenced. And one of the things that he mentioned to me, that during the land development process, the soil can be compromised through bringing in fill and changing and altering how it looks. So if we were to leave an undisturbed area where someone is going to be installing their buffer or their drain field, and until the drain field is installed, that area should be left undisturbed to maintain the soil classifier's true assessment of that block, and not what it may look like in 2 years, which is what.
Yeah, that's a good
I agree with
idea.
that.
And the setbacks, I talked to a few different professionals about this, and some of them recommended allowing encroachment along the rear. The septic tank. So as proposed, the drain field itself is the only one that can't encroach. The septic tank can still be installed in setbacks as written here and as we apply every day. So, those things should be of consideration to the commission as well. If there is to be alleviation from those, I'd be happy to
Yeah, I understand nobody wants somebody else's septic tank 5 feet from their property line, and that makes a lot of sense. But when we're 3 lines down proposing to quintuple the setbacks. This is short-sighted, being with what's coming, I feel. And if we were to put a footage requirement, 20 feet, 30 feet, 15 feet, something to that effect, that would solve the problem of it being too close to the neighbors without making as many lots impossible to build on.
Let's not conflate two different ordinances.
Well, they are very much in
Yes. Yes.
connection with each other, because we can't make this rule and then change all the setbacks to unachievable and ridiculous setbacks, and then have something that pertains to it that we've already approved, right?
We're gonna keep these ordinances separate.
That's fine.
That's how council voting, that's how we're going to talk about it.
Well, then we should put the setback one first before we talk about this, because it's germane. I think anybody but you would agree with me. I'm sorry for being rude.
Okay, I got it.
Thanks.
Kelly, what about you?
I don't really have any substantive recommendations. I think Dan has consulted with people who know a lot more about this issue than I do. With regard to the issue of setbacks and buffers, I agree a drain field should not be in a required buffer, right? Because the buffer is supposed to be vegetated.
I don't think anybody's.
Okay, well, it's in the same line. It says drain field can encourage into setback or buffer. So buffers is fine. Setbacks, I mean, we're talking about right now. Putting aside the later ordinance. Interior setbacks in our our 2 current residential districts is only 15 feet. Right?
Mhm.
And I assume, Dan. We have front setbacks and we have interior setbacks. And then wetlands and critical line setbacks, but there's no rear. Is rear an interior setback?
That's how it's been designed. There's not an
Okay.
individual rear, it's just front and then interior.
Okay, so we've got 35-foot front setbacks and then 15-foot side and rear. I don't know that, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to keep a drain field 15 feet from the property line. But
That's not gonna be for long. I'll say it again.
no,
Right.
I agree.
Well, that's where we are now, correct?
Correct. The residential, agricultural district and all of our zoning districts conform to the 35 and 15 setback requirements. Currently,
Yes.
yes, we do.
Okay.
Say that again.
Sorry, yeah, we didn't hear you.
Existing lots, the septic systems do encroach.
How close?
This would be for new lots.
Yes, how close do they go?
DES allows up to 5 feet from a property line.
Okay, that's for the field or the tank?
Field and tank.
Okay,
Yeah, all the parts.
Yeah.
now that's that overflow issue.
And then there's also a setback off of structures. Or only is 10 feet.
Well, just curious question, how, if we got a 50 or 75 foot setback from the well with the septic, how do we manage that from property owner to property owner?
So, DES, so if it's a subdivision, which this would be reviewed as a subdivision, they would apply for, their subdivision and show where their well can configure and where their septic can configure. DES will require the 75 feet, and the Bureau of Water will ensure that there aren't any current septic systems within that range. One of the reasons why we're requiring wells to now conform in this for new lots is to avoid someone from putting a well in a 4-corner property line and preventing someone from building septic there. Which could take place, and it takes place in other areas. So this would not only, promote sustainable land management, but also respecting adjacent property owners with removing drain fields and making sure, our wells are properly sited on these lots.
Well, I mean, I think, why don't we just define a required setback for septic systems, drain fields and tanks? That way it doesn't matter what other setbacks get changed to. But tank, the drain field always have to be 5 feet, 15 feet from the property.
I'm open for interpretation here.
You said the state requires 5 feet,
Correct.
which seems awfully close.
Mhm.
I mean, it's 10 feet,
It's been
15.
15 for
It's been
a
15.
long time now. If we were to apply it to the thing, that's been the setback for some time now. It certainly seems more reasonable than not in any setback. Because especially with what's coming up, I mean, if and especially given this 50% rule that's coming up, that some of these houses demolished in a hurricane. And then there's this new 200 or 300 foot setback coming. But they can't do anything with their property, you know?
We're still defining this into the ordinance, so 15 feet.
I think 15 feet is more reasonable than the entire setback, that's for sure.
How do you feel about that?
We're saying 15 feet off the property line regardless of what the setback is.
Exactly.
Ignoring setbacks, how far?
That's for,
We're talking about setback.
understand, that's for well and septic.
Yes.
And then will there be areas where we can make concessions for someone that comes before us that's at a hardship that their lot is not gonna be usable? I mean, if it needs to be 13 feet. I mean, really, 13 feet, 15 feet are no difference in my mind, but I'd hate for us to be so pigeonholed into this that somebody's got this great property. Somebody's grandma wants them to be able to build right next to them, and sorry, you can't, even though that your family's had this property for 150 years. Because we made the rule 15, we can't change it and we can't work around, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so there is the possibility for adding waivers. I will say that, for the subdivision standards, minor subdivisions would be handled at staff level, major subdivisions would be handled at planning commission level. If a subdivision is approved that doesn't meet the zoning code, it's gonna need a variance before it can be approved anyways, so there is that check and balance there, but I hear you on the waiver.
Subdivision, I don't think we would hear that, but BZA, we normally take individual lots of.
That's my question. Does the BZA have purview to hear? So in that vein, if somebody needed a variance, so if we have a 15-foot minimum setback for septic systems and wells. And somebody wants a variance, do they go to BZA or they go to planning commission?
It depends on the subdivision. So if
It's
it's,
tied to the but what if it's not a subdivision? What if I just wanna build on my lot?
that was previously subdivided
Yes,
before or after this date,
before, so it's an existing lot.
then it would not, the 15-foot would not apply to that.
Okay.
They could stay the exact same.
Okay.
This is just new lots after July 1st, so
Okay.
anything applied after July 1st is what would cover as proposed currently. That date could be changed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Where would they go?
after July 1st, the subdivision would be under review by staff. And if it would require a variance for approval, then that approval would be conditioned on obtaining that variance.
From the BZA?
From the BZA.
Okay, that was my.
And say hypothetically that nothing's coming up here, but we've got a rule, somebody makes the 50% value of the property and you're gonna have to rebuild your house because it's less than 50% salvageable. And then all these things were to be applied. Given that this thing says anything that's after July 1st, 2026 should possibly say, or unless you're required to rebuild your house in the state of a natural disaster of some sort. Does that question make sense?
Yes, so I think you're referring to like force majeure requirements in law. Yeah, so grandfathering is something from an entire zoning code that the town really needs to take a more deeper look on. Currently, our language really only refers to non-conforming lots of record or non-conforming buffers for those requirements. Grandfathering is very seldom in our code and that type of language as well, so. It would be a good consideration for the board in the future to review other grandfathering clauses in different communities or incorporating one here. But of course, this one would be new lots. And if a lot was under different configurations than another, it would be conditioned on approval to the PCA.
All right, when I got together with Jay, who's managed things in this area, Mr. White. We along with Dan came up with two things on C, if there is new construction activity in the area, it should be repurposed. Which is something that Dan feels strongly about and we agree. In other words, if they disturb the area that they're going to allegedly put their septic field in their septic. And it was perked by DES before. And they disturb that land and bring in fill or whatever, it should be repurposed.
So reclassified this.
Yeah, correct. Reclassified.
And that's also on item 2 in my statute.
Good. And we got into a discussion of, the new distances, 12 inches for, a regular septic. And, its proposal was for 8. The current is 6. I have fair faith in engineered systems and I like to be able to have people use their property. As much as engineeringly feasible, and I was favoring 6, going back to the original 6. But 8 would be fine too, and that's where we left it. Between when the two of us talked, the repurking and how the ZOS is zone of saturation, how close to the zone of saturation can you be and still qualify for a septic?
And when you said that y'all had talked about bringing it back to 6, was that just for the AT system? The advanced?
For this, yes.
Gotcha.
You're never gonna be able to put a regular septic system in with a ZOS of 6. It's not possible.
Do we know what other towns ZOS height vertical limit requirement is around here?
Oh, so like the typical, where the zone of saturation exists presently,
It's 6 inches per DES. And how many towns have made requirements higher than that? Like we're proposing.
I have not seen any. Like I said, this requirement is something that North Carolina models.
Yeah.
This would promote, potentially better water quality for our residents in the community, especially for those that are on well. If they're septic and well, the effluent is going to be treated at a higher level than it would with a conventional system. There's maintenance in every septic system. This one does require it for its warranty, so there are some additional costs with that. When talking with the design professional, it was about $600 annually. Is what someone with advanced treatment would be looking at. In my recommendations, after talking to that design professional, he recommended going from 12 inches without to 8 inches, so a 2-inch offset. And then going from the 8-inch width down to the 6.
Okay, that's reasonable.
And what that would do is if someone did need an engineered system, it would be more financially feasible for them to get one with advanced treatment than it would be one without. So upfront cost, it depends on the lot, but we're talking about a couple $1,000 upfront cost that change would make for an individual. And it would incentivize advanced treatment over a conventional system that, depending on the soil composition, could fail. But there is larger education that has to happen within the community about septic anyway, so.
And that pricing consideration would presumably be because the addition of all the dirt required to make it conventional would be less than the added expense of the advanced. I don't really even know exactly what's involved in the guys. Did they tell you what that was specifically?
It ranges,
Duration
yeah, it ranges in different types. I mean, it goes from fabric wall to, injection, chemical injection. So fabric wall is just taking canvas and lining the inside of the septic tank. And what that does is it retains bacteria in there to speed along the process. Where otherwise it might not. So, it is, there are costs associated with a lot of things. I think, if we're looking at the development in the town and promoting sustainable development, septic systems really have to be looked at because, without a proper management in place, there could be some pretty big issues.
We also, we did talk about, at some point, we're probably going to have to consider limiting what can be determined as an engineered system, because a simple search would give you pages of pictures of these things. In fact, the feds do it very well. I've spent some time looking. There's some major engineered systems, including silos that are like 10 feet in the air. But there, you can basically do anything you want with an engineered system. You don't need ground, but we'll probably have to do something about that in the future. I doubt we're gonna see anything like that here. What I've heard so far on this is setback of 15 feet. Repurk the property, the septic field if that has been disturbed. And, a debate about whether engineered systems should be the state 6 inches or our current, proposed 8 inches. Is there anything else?
I have just non-substantive. edits, of course.
So here we go.
Well, we wanna make
Of
sure this
course.
says what we want it to say, right?
Yes.
Okay. So paragraph A, the second line, shall is crossed out, but I think that was an inadvertent, because then there's, without it, there's no verb.
Yes.
In A two. It says identified setbacks or buffers, and that language is repeated in 3.1B as well. I would change identified to required.
Yeah, one was private water systems and one was the on-site waste disposal, so I let that one go, but you are right, it's repetitive.
Well, I just think identified, I mean, what, I don't know what that means. Require, I know what a required setback is, I don't know what an identified setback is.
Okay.
So that's my only right
Okay
there.
with that, Mark? All right.
Number 3.1, I think septic systems is in quotes, I think it should also be in parentheses. That same sentence, I'm not sure we need within the incorporated limits of the town of Allendale. I mean, the ordinance only applies to properties in the incorporated town limits.
Good point.
3.1A, the last sentence, proposed needs a B, if advanced treatment is being proposed. B, change identified to required setbacks or buffers. And then D, record should be recorded. And then I have a question on that one.
Yes.
What if the subdivision is one lot into two? Do you have to have record CCRs for a 2-lot subdivision?
Yeah, we could modify that to fix it. So DES does require all new septic permits to be recorded with a maintenance plan. So
Okay.
that just kind of like should have reinvented it, but I think what I did there was I took requirements that we've imposed on other subdivisions and input those there.
Okay, I wasn't aware that the new requirements, so.
So how should we word it then?
I think, for all new systems, maintenance and monitoring schedule shall be submitted to the town with the permit to show proof that that's been done. So we have a record of it as well
Which isn't any undue strain on anybody because they're already making it to give to DES.
for any new permit.
Understood?
So they're giving you the same thing that they're giving to DES.
Correct.
That's just so that y'all.
So we have.
That makes sense.
Okay, so go ahead. We're sitting here with the repurp, the 15 feet and 6 versus the 8. I'm missing anything else that we've changed besides obviously the needed grammar.
I noticed one grammar thing, but I don't know how important it is. It's in the staff report, staff findings 2A. It says, the applicant should be required to reassess. I assume that meant reassess.
That's correct.
I'm turning.
Oh, and then I noticed that.
What you got?
Autocorrect.
I just want to make sure I understand, so we're. Private wells should not be placed in the identified setbacks or buffers, but won't be moving that to 15 feet as long as it's not in a buffer.
Yeah, that's what he.
So it's really not a setback.
Yeah.
It's a setback for the
Yeah,
septic.
the word setback would go away, in my understanding, we would just say within no wells or septic systems.
But if you've got a
within 15
setback of 25 feet. Then are we saying we can't put it at 25
No,
feet?
the words, the verbiage of setback goes away in what we are proposing as a group, and it would just change to.
Perfect.
No wells or septic within 15 feet of a property line.
Yeah.
Right?
That's correct.
We just don't want sewer on this neighbor's property. That's it.
Okay. Nobody wants that.
Okay, now we've got the repurp, we're okay on the setback and the property line, we're okay on. What are we gonna do with 8 versus 6? I would like to hear a discussion on that.
I like the proposition that we change the 6 to 8 for conventional and engineered. And then AT can stay at 6. That's what you had mentioned.
That's correct.
What stays at 6?
If it's an advanced treatment.
stays,
Stays at the current 6, above the zone of saturation.
Zone of saturation.
well, currently, this thing says 8, I propose 6, which is the current standard.
Right, well, I thought that that's what our current thing was, that if, I guess we don't have advanced in there at all.
Well, no, we don't.
Yeah.
Presently, it is 12 without, 8 inches width. In the staff recommendations, it would change 8 without, 6 width.
Yeah, that's what I meant, I just think we should go with Dan's recommendation that it's 8 with a regular system or a.
All right, let's go on this again. Drain fields without advanced treatment mechanisms must maintain, it currently says 812. Correct. So let's go into what? 8.
Yeah, and if you look on page 22, he's already got it now, David, that's helpful.
Yeah, it's his first staff, the under staff findings. and stuff.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get this, which is what.
I got you.
And from the zone of saturation, or seasonal water table, whichever comes first, if the advanced treatment is being proposed, I assume it could be there. This distance may be reduced to no less than 6 inches, is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, so we've got that. Or, okay, so we got the property line, we've gone from 12 to 8 and from 8 to 6 on, the zone of saturation. And we have gotten we've perking if they disturb the light.
Do you, would, the commission like me to use the language as submitted in 2A, or is there another version of that? Language that would like for the resubmittal of a soil classification in the undisturbed buffer is. Work for you?
2A in your staff report.
Correct.
I think that's fine, assuming you correct real assess to reassess.
Yeah, it seems to me that. The most clear cut motion could be to go with staff recommended changes with the addition of changing any setback language to within 15 feet of the property line. That seems to be exactly what we're after, using something that's more clearly already laid out in front of them.
We normally don't change the staff report. You can do that to the staff, but we have to make this change to the ordinance and send it back to council, who will do. God knows what.
I just want to clear the audience.
No,
Is that, Dan, in your staff report, 1B? Is that, are you suggesting an additional standard based on
So,
US?
yeah, so that one, I think is more of a comprehensive review. But it is up to the consideration of the board to think about where our lots are, what different zone of saturation we may see. So we do see areas where it's 0 at grade and down to 12 inches. Those can be installed as an ultra shallow system by DES presently. I think it is of note that the additional offsets would change those ultra shallow systems and they would require to meet new requirements through DES. But after talking to a soil classifier, he had recommended considering a range of zone of saturation. So if it's anywhere from 0 to 12 inches, the offset be 12 inches. If it's 12 to 18, it's 8 inches. If it's, anything below 18 inches, 6, which is the minimum.
but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Let's stick with what we're trying to get through tonight.
One other question I had about advanced treatment systems. Is that a generally an industry-wide known term enough that we don't have to define it and list what we count as an AT system? To reduce confusion?
So yeah, I can do research on that. So that was also in my staff report that I think I noted that there were a few definitions that needed to be added. Luckily, we have our meeting tonight and a meeting next week. So I kind of wanted to have the discussion in here where the commission was going with the ordinance before, any definitions were provided, so we could look at a range of them if needed. I know zone of saturation, advanced treatment, and I think those are the two main ones. The other ones we can pull from DS requirements, the state statute.
Yeah, I'd match DES whenever we can.
Okay.
Well, why wouldn't we consider Dan's recommendation in 1B, a tiered system? I mean, isn't that an alternative to what's presented in staff finding number 1? Yeah, so why wouldn't we consider that?
What we need, but
Okay.
how much the staff reports are we gonna consider? We got staff reports for the next two too.
Well, that's what their job is. It's recommendations based on their expertise.
Okay, so
He's talked to soil classifier about it.
how is this gonna go in the ordinance? You want it in the ordinance? Is that what you want extracted and put?
No, I'm saying, in Dan's staff report, he's recommended. In lieu of what's in the ordinance, the 12 and 8 or 8 and 6, whatever we decided to do, to consider a tiered system. Based on the depth of the zone saturation, which to me seems like a good approach. Versus the one that's in the draft.
In theory, what that recommendation would do is that if someone has the lot that can maintain a septic system, the town is not imposing an additional requirement on them. These systems would more so look at a lot where otherwise further restrictions are in play from the state and then additionally from the town to make sure that, you know, we are promoting sustainable and best land management practices. So the tiered system, after talking to a soil classifier, you know, he told me that would achieve a much larger impact and not restrict as many different lots. So we would achieve the same goal, but hurt less individuals. Hurt is a wrong word to use, but affects less individuals.
That's fine, but we're gonna have to have that wording. I'd like to see the ordinance with this in it. So that we make a significant change.
We can see it next week to.
Yeah.
What, at our next meeting possibly, will that work?
I mean, Dan,
Can you write it out?
Dan just mentioned he's gonna add some definitions and bring those back to us
I
next week.
understand, but we gotta see it in toto.
Oh, I agree, but
And
I'm
do we
just
have
saying,
enough time between now and the next meeting to publicly announce it? Okay. And just for a little more clarification on this, 1B that we're talking about now, I like the idea that you went out and found that, and thank you for that. So as I'm reading it, if the zone saturation is between 0 and 12 inches, then we should apply the 8 and 6 inch rules to be above it.
In theory, the shallower you are, the likelihood of needing a higher offset, because what that is, you know, we want to say if you're shallow, you need to be higher off of that area. If you have soil that is already off of there, you know, there's really no need to add additional requirement because they're gonna need it anyways.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. If it is between 0 and 12 inches, then that rule would automatically apply because you would have to be that far away. But if it was 18 inches down, there's not really any rules. As in regard to our first bit of discussion where we said the 8 and the 6 inch or the 12 and the 8 inch, whichever. Right, because 18 inches down, that's a moot point.
Yeah, it's just a different approach to look at the same requirement of increasing that distance. So if we wanted to say from 0 to 12, where we're gonna require 12 inches, from 0 to 18, we're gonna require 8. Because if you think about it, you know, you have to maintain 6 inches. So in reality, anything from 0 to 12 is already gonna need to be engineered anyways.
Right.
And then anything from 12 to 16 is likely would fall under the ultra shallow system. But again, you know, we're really close to that seasonal water table. And depending on, you know, heightened precipitation, other impacts to our environment, you know, when someone is soil testing today, in 2 years that water table may increase. So if we add an additional offset, we're not only covering for that individual, we're also covering for everyone else. And it you know, it is it does add an additional cost to it, but in the long term, if we're gonna promote that better land management practice, when we see a hurricane or a large rain event or anything like that, this additional offset will protect water quality and help prevent the system from failing
Understood.
in practice.
Okay, your staff finding number 3, can you explain that?
Yes. So, I identified in the ordinance that the setback requirements would apply to the drain field only. Septic tanks are already allowed to encroach in side yards. So talking to design professionals, to avoid having a septic tank in the middle of someone's backyard, put it on the side yard, or front yard. So those were excluded from the regulation, additional regulations for that one purpose, to allow the ease of configuration of a septic tank. But the drain field, I think there should be decent consideration of those setbacks, and that explains that in there, if that answers your question.
So basically it's saying that a septic tank can go closer than our new 15-foot rule, but just not the drain field where the effluent is actually being distributed.
Correct, as proposed,
Yeah.
which is required or allowed by DES.
Mhm.
It's just the
I think that's reasonable.
But that's not how the ordinance reads it, right?
It is, so,
Okay,
it would be, 3.1 B. Drain field must be designed to not encroach into identified setbacks or buffers that, of course, is being adjusted to 15.
it's just implying that tanks can't get them.
Correct, yeah, so tanks are not included, so
Yes.
it would just be the drain field.
I think we should just say that, to be clear,
Okay.
septic tank can be
Anywhere you want,
up to 5 feet from the property, or whatever,
or
just make it clear.
right up to the property line, because that's how it is. When they were putting it on the side,
DES requires
oh,
5.
they do, okay, yeah, sorry.
Maybe you just say
Yeah.
septic tanks can be located wherever allowed by the state or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
something along those lines.
So basically, you just take the,
Then
Yeah.
opportunity ordinance to
and
align.
basically you just take your staff report and turn it into the ordinance with the addition of the 15-foot thing in place of the setback.
I would like to entertain a motion to,
What is, state say about well, as far as, setback?
I mean, they don't have the additional requirement, it's only offset off of, I think they have property line offsets. That number is away from me at the moment, but you know, talking to a few different design professionals. And also the state, they thought that encroaching into certain setbacks, you know, should be avoided. To avoid, you know, if I have a lot and someone next to me I know is gonna go install a septic tank. In theory, someone today could go install a private well, and prevent them from installing a septic tank there. So what this would do, it would promote neighborly best habits, to avoid that from
I
happening.
think it's 25 feet, because when I put mine, I had to do something.
5 feet.
I think it's 5.
It's 5 feet, it's 5 feet.
5 feet.
That's current.
Back to the we are. I'm gonna entertain a motion to send this back to our planner for to make the changes that we discussed, including the ones that we've settled on.
One more question before we make the motion is. Back to that 15, if we've made the 15 for septics, obviously the effluence is what we're trying to keep from the neighbors. But is the 15 overly restrictive in the wells, now that I'm thinking about that, because, I mean, I understand that it helps the four corner lot, you would put something in there to save the four corner lot dilemma. But, you know, 75 feet, that's a lot of footage on a property. And if you could put your well within, you know, 6.5 feet of the property line and get you 75.
Yeah, the minimum lot width is 100 feet, so in theory for new lots, a 75-foot well with its buffer. Depending on where it is, the additional 15 feet would be, you know. Would prevent that infringement on other lots with the 100-foot width.
Are we requiring the plats to be submitted well and septic locations?
Presently, if a lot cannot be serviced by public water, a well permit has to be provided and septic as well to make sure that before the lot is subdivided, that it meets the requirements.
But will the location of those be on the plan so we can see where they are?
Yes, so as proposed, what this would do is at preliminary plat review, we would see where a proposed well would be and where a proposed septic tank would be.
I like 5 feet,
I like 5 feet, more than 15.
because if we can plan ahead, we look at the plat, say we can, this is 5 feet, but no, way, I like
I'm
5 feet.
sure 5 feet is the state. We got it as the state.
We can say 5 feet or the state guideline, whichever's small.
Well, let's figure out what it is, look at how that's 160. All right.
Okay, well, you can look at us, Dan, and report back to us with it.
Yes,
So we're adding a well setback to this?
From.
Is that what we're saying?
A well property line buffer, I don't know what you would call it, but. So we're 15 feet away from property lines for septic, 5 feet away from property line for well.
I don't
But there,
know how we got into wells accepted.
Well, they're both in the same order. So well is covered under item 2, septic is under item 3.
Okay,
Well is provided wastewater system.
I'll be looking forward to seeing the next one.
So I'll go ahead and make the motion. I make a motion that we move forward with this ordinance based on staff findings with the knowledge that we're going to do away with the setbacks, the exclusion out of setbacks, and replace that with a 15-foot limit within the property lines of septic and a 5-foot or more distance away from property lines for wells. Is that adequate, both of you?
I'd like to see them be invited.
Can we make the motion that that's what we want and then approve that as amended and then you bring it to us next week? What's the?
It would be,
procedure for
you
that?
would be a motion to defer recommendation for further amendments and list
To
that
read it
in.
next meeting, I like that. Then I changed my motion to defer.
That's gonna be my clarification.
Okay.
Defer,
Yeah,
if you wanted to defer it.
so I make a motion that we defer this to next meeting with the anticipation of the newly written. As we've discussed today, to be approved at that point.
In other words, you can rewrite it, like. Okay.
Second, okay.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I would like to, move.
To clarify the vote, were they also aye votes by Mr. Hardy and the chair?
Yes,
I just didn't hear, I'm
to
sorry.
defer
Yes,
for getting the final language. Finally,
thank you.
all right. We have another ordinance. Now we'd like to open discussion on lighting and regulations of ordinance 2026-06. Do I have a motion to open the discussion?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chairperson, if I may, could I begin with the staff? So, in the action plan of the approved town comprehensive plan, there were 2 goals that outlined the need to create additional lighting regulations for a dark sky. To protect the town's dark sky has been a community discussion for previous administration before our new town council and even the comprehensive plan was proposed. Planning commission has reviewed different things to move towards a dark sky for certain plan developments. This ordinance takes the recommendations from our comp plan and also the Dark Sky International Template Ordinance, as well as some other municipalities within South Carolina to bring one here locally. Some brief overview findings for planning commission's consideration tonight. That other communities have used dark sky ordinance to regulate commercial or recreational facilities that would normally result in large amount of light pollution. It's important to ensure that any proposed lighting requirements do not conflict with any applicable state or federal law. The requirements of a photometric lighting plan may be too burdensome for certain activities. A feasible process for compliance and enforcement of this ordinance should be created to assist staff in ensuring these requirements are met. At the time of this drafting of the report, staff have not consulted with a design expert on this matter. And that's all staff have as far as this ordinance. Just as another touch point, myself and legal counsel and town administrator and Tia have reviewed this, and there are certain things that we're open to discussing and making sure that it hits the mark. There are some things that should be considered for review.
I had to look up foot candles. Thank you for the opportunity to educate myself. The maximum foot candles here is 10 as proposed, and the highest pole is 18 feet, as I understand. So what is typical outdoor light levels? For walkways and residential paths, it's 1 to 2 foot candles. For parking lots and standard security, it's 2 to 5 foot candles. For active loading docks, ATMs, high commercial zone, it's 10 to 20 foot candles. Outright is a foot candle. 1 foot candles considered very low light. 5 is considered a dim store environment, and it's always walkways And unobstructed sunlight is 1,000. And general office is 20 to 50. So that is what we are actually talking about here. And 10-foot candles is. Oh, according to Google Gemini, bright level illumination significantly brighter than standard security for African life. And that's what I got. Now we have this ordinance, and person on our committee most expert in this is Kelly, so could you lead it off?
Well, I'll start with the broadest thing, since you just talked about foot candles. And Dan, you expressed concern about requiring photometric plan, for all applicants. So this is gonna apply to all of the residential, commercial, detached houses are gonna have to comply with this. I agree, photometric plan, if I just wanna build a house, is onerous. The modern best practice for regulating outdoor lighting is lumens per acre. That's what the model lighting ordinance from 2011 uses, it's what the dark sky model ordinance uses, and it's from 2024. So that would be my recommendation, do away with foot candles, use a lumens per acre limit, which there's a starting point for residential in the 2024 Dark Sky Association, model ordinance. For commercial uses, that same model ordinance recommends using IES. It's like an ANSI, it's like a standard, and I wanna make sure I'm getting the name right. Yeah, it's ANSI IES lighting standard, so for commercial, I think that makes sense. It is, you have to buy it, right? It's not something that staff would necessarily have, so I'm not sure that that's the best thing to use for commercial, but. Commercial developers and design professionals are used to using that, I'd say most probably are. But. Maybe it makes sense to just use lumens per acre for all development, residential and commercial. I think the term cutoff fixture is a dated term. IBS doesn't use that term anymore. It's fully shielded, which means there's no light emitted above 90 degrees. So I think we should change that. You mentioned height of fixtures. 18 feet is not tall enough for sports fields, and soccer fields are taller than that. So I think there needs to be, a lot of lighting ordinances will have special provisions for sports fields. There are ways to meet dark sky principles and light sports fields, so we can, and there's some options again in that model ordinance. When we're talking about height, I think we need to be more specific and say mountain height, because you're talking about mountain, you're concerned about where the luminaire is, the light is, not the overall height of the pole. I also think we need, under prohibitions, a section on nuisance lighting. And I'm happy to provide some language for that, but that would, so this is gonna apply going forward. Right, it doesn't apply to existing, but there's some really bad lighting out there. And if there is anything that's a nuisance, it would be nice if the town had a provision to be able to enforce that. I've got a bunch of other random little things with those are, I think, not big.
Well, when we put together the home development, this was what I put in as, which was basically dictated by you. And in the plan development, we say all lighting must have a color temperature no greater than 3,000 Kelvin, be fully shielded, directing downward to preserve night sky visibility, reducing sky glow, and minimizing light trespass onto adjacent properties. That's in our plan development thing.
I think this is gonna be better, so we could probably replace that with this.
Absolutely. This was to defer to that when it got done. Glad we're on it, but it seems like you have significant, well, it's obviously got significant changes. Would you like to work with Dan to come up with a code that we can send back to council saying. We much prefer this to what you did. I don't know where they got they get these model legislations and put them in here and. It's not specific to all and all, we will know.
So I do agree that there, I mean, going from foot candles to lumens per acre is significant, and that's gonna take some. Calibration, I think, because the lumens per acre is based on lighting zones, which we may just wanna have one lighting zone for the whole town, and that makes it easier. I'm concerned about timing, because councils have first reading on this, is that correct? Okay, and we have 30 days to make our recommendation on this. So what does that mean for timing? Do we need to take this up again next week? Or are they considering trying to do tomorrow?
Yeah, we can. I think, you know, at the last town council meeting, I referenced that y'all had deferred for professional advice on the tree ordinance. And it seems like they were you know, amenable to that. So I think with decent communication back between the planning commission and town council on what we're doing and what y'all are doing would allow them to be okay with an extension. So,
Okay.
you know, these will also still require a public hearing. So, you know, depending on that, you may want to
That's
consider.
exactly what I was gonna propose, because they already took our request. To hold off on the tree ordinance until we heard from some tree experts and try to figure out what was right for this town.
That's it.
And I think they'll do the same with this. Yeah.
I think, you know, I think for this one, they wanted to have something in place, but they acknowledge that it needs to be, we need to get it right.
So how would you recommend the proposal of this council? We need more time to study it.
Yeah, I would say, you know, similar to what we did with the tree survey, or tree ordinance is that, planning commission's defers recommendation for staff and planning commission to refine what is currently here. Based on best practices in the industry. If I'm hearing Kelly's. suggestion, that's correct.
So moved.
Second.
On
Anyway,
there.
I didn't get a chance to look.
Us?
I didn't get a chance to talk. I only have two quick questions. So would this apply to all new constructions on any lots that already exist, or is this only going to be implemented to subdivided pieces?
This one would be all. As proposed, it would be its own separate zoning section, so similar to our wetland and tree survey or tree requirements, it's its own separate, so this just reinforces that. Any new construction and then minor major subdivisions would inform, so that's where my concern about the photometric survey came in, because. That is, it's a stretch, but other communities use that, so staff wanted to provide, you know, the recommendations of.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kelly, both that would be completely inverse on a guy who wants to build a house. Now, my concern with limits per acre is it's just a matter of me looking at the boxes of all the lights that he's putting outside and counting up all the lumen.
Yes,
Okay, so that's easy.
yeah,
I got you.
and that way, that it's easy for staff to evaluate site plan, because all the spec sheets will have the links on them, and just add them up. I mean, now that's. That doesn't mean that somebody can't go out on site and install something different and then you have to touch it and everything, but, you know,
Yeah.
theoretically, it's.
Right. And I would just want it to not be so restricted, couldn't put up lights in your road streets and things like that, I think it really makes the houses around here look nice. To your point, the nuisance lights versus not trying to control the things that really bring beauty to our town at nighttime.
Yeah, for sure, and you know, the hope for this is that we can also get some education out there on what these, you know. Lights look like. I bought new lights for my floodlights the other day, and Home Depot has the Kelvin on all of them. And there's actually some that you can buy that can be adjusted automatically, and you
Yeah,
know,
most all of them shielded down.
pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think we can. We can exempt. You know, really low level landscape lighting and stuff that, you know, that shines right onto a building and doesn't go off the tree, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Seasonal lighting is another one that we can exempt. That one is you know. It's a little hairy sometimes on how long you can have it out. Staff wanted to kind of leave that one alone and.
Let's leave Christian skies alone. That's a fighting word.
And I,
Rural South Carolina.
That was all my questions.
Can I call a point of clarification for your last motion that you guys made?
It
Can
hasn't
we-
really changed. We just talked about something
Okay,
that we wanna
But it wasn't-
study it further and before council moves it down.
do we need to vote to just or rescind that, so
Well,
there's been further comment?
you don't have a vote yet.
You don't
Yeah,
have
we have
to
a
keep talking, right?
motion in a second, but we haven't had.
Okay, I have a question before you vote. How do streetlights factor into this?
There's something on there about working with Berkeley Electric, right, to.
Yeah, so in my recommendation, you know, I mentioned that we might want to talk to Berkeley Electric to see about what street lamps and they provide to people, because that's where most people get their street lamps from.
Sure.
So, and as far as street lighting, I think it's just made across all, just to avoid spillover in your roadways, not to interfere with vision or adjacent properties.
And we should be careful to make it Berkeley Electric and Dominion, because they have a bunch of spots out here, not just Berkeley Electric.
Right.
Yeah, I think if we go to a lumens per acre metric, we might need something separate for streetlights, because there'll be, I mean, if you're subdividing, I mean, you can look at the whole subdivision, but after, I don't know, I think it'd be cleaner to just have lumens per acre for
Non-street lights,
lots, and
yeah.
then something different for streetlights.
Yeah, because that could be all the lights you're able to put, if you got one street on your front yard, yeah, I agree with that.
I did, now Berkeley does have their outdoor lights, you know, that you can just get in your yard, they have. The types listed on their website with the approximate lumens. So we definitely need to sort of consider that, if we're gonna go to lumens per acre, we need to consider that, because. Some of them are really ridiculously bright, but I think the others would fall within the lumens per acre category, so, but those are different than streetlights, I think, or could be different. Okay.
So would this also be a motion to defer presumably to,
It's still the same motion to defer.
Yes, it's still the same.
yeah, it still exists. And it has been properly moved and seconded.
Yes.
Yes, all in favor?
Put back in there, take this movie, now see the news.
Yeah.
That's wrong, these one.
Yes, I want to start with just a couple of the facts. And then we will go to Dan's stuff. There has been a tendency to take model laws, sometimes not widely circulated model laws, and apply them to all of them. And have some confusion on definitions. Neither Mr. Riker, who earns his living doing this, nor I, after some research, we can quite understand some of these things. But the setback is from the wetlands boundary, so you have the vegetation, you have the buffer and the setback. And those two are in number. And that's what most of these things are talking about, setback, the total number, not one plus the other. They're within the same thing. And some people have been adding them up. But you don't add them. Anyway. We have a whole bunch of stuff here under all in God's control called non-jurisdictional waters. Which previously purpose decision 2023, which is really mucked up things around here. And I would like to give one clarification. I started off with where are we? We have been modeling much of what we do along 17 with the Charleston County 17 North plan, which is 1,000 feet and divided by 17, and the county owns much of the property along 17 and much of the property along the coast. It is not, it is been owned on, but it's not owned on. For instance, Romanian Creek is all Charleston County until some recently.
Not, you said owned, it's not owned by Charleston.
In the town, yes, they're planning commission owned, basically, they make the rules for those things, we don't. Sure. So, we've been trying to get fairly close to, in most circumstances with Charleston County. Charleston County is not a do all, but he's not fairly good ordinance. Charleston County requires a 35-foot buffer and a 50-foot setback, the two are one number, so the furthest from the water is 50 feet. Okay, that's Charleston County. Now, let's get to this. I've got both Jay's comments all over this place and my comments, but we're gonna start out with staff report.
So the original version of this ordinance was passed by town council at first reading on November 6th, 2025 town council meeting. As presented in November 6th, 2025 town council meeting, there was additional edits noted by staff and also members of the public. Members of town council approached staff on making those recommendations in addition to staff edits to this version. What you have before you today from a comprehensive overview, the distances and non-conforming buffer requirements and wetland impact applications are all currently in effect. There are parameters for existing lots. There is an area where we can improve some of that. There's also parameters for those who wish to apply for an impact within their buffer, whether it's non-conforming or this new ordinance would imply. So, some additional staff findings are further identification of these wetlands. For the example I filled is, where would we see a riparian buffer in the town? It's the Wando River. It's the only area where we would see a riparian buffer. So since we know that that is our only riparian area, maybe a good idea to write out Wando River riparian buffer to avoid any kind of confusion in the future. Some people may consider other water bodies as riparian, but the true USGS definition, it would just be the Wando River for the town.
And we're hearing way too much about it is and not.
So clarity on what activities would be covered under a wetland notification versus a wetland impact. Presently, the wetland impact can come with a negative connotation. As it's written in this ordinance, the wetland impact is applied for any activity that is, closer to the wetland within the buffer area. That doesn't necessarily mean it's impacting the wetland directly, but work is taking place within the identified buffer or setback area. And someone has to apply to the town for approval for that activity. So the wetland notification, on the other hand, is certifying that they won't impact the buffer area or the wetland. It's staff's consideration to planning commission that we follow metrics that the state already have. With the Bureau of Coastal Management, they have different permit authority. On the beachfront, there's a beachfront notification, and then there's a general permit. What that looks at is different activities within different zones. So if you're doing work within the identified setback, as proposed, that would be 15 feet, versus when you're doing work in the buffer, which is, as proposed for general, is 75, and increases based on the different type of wetland, as outlined here. So it's staff's recommendation that these two forms should be changed. Individuals that would not impact wetlands should just, staff can update our current action statement that includes a statement in there that they're notarizing and signing stating, I will not impact, and no additional fees or applications should be required for that. That's staff's recommendation on what's in here. The establishment of a fee for wetland impact applications, this kind of goes for both of those things. If we are going to require town staff or additional consultant to go out and confirm where the wetland delineation is or should be, that fee should be compounded into What we are imposing presently as this is drafted, the application of this version of the ordinance should not be implemented until that fee is established and an application has been approved by the town. That's in there written in red line, out of staff's recommendation based on current applications in tow. Consideration of an annual review of all denied applications. There has been a lot of feedback about whether an activity could or couldn't be. I think it would be in the best interest of the town if we were to implement this ordinance to consider an annual review of it to see what has been denied and how we can either change the ordinance or revise it to allow more use of property where we would otherwise restrict it as written presently. And finally, staff have been working with other communities to see how they're implementing ordinances similar to this. So this version, the original template came from the South Carolina Environmental Law Project, was approved at first reading in September by town council, revised by planning commission in September of 25, last September, and then recommended for approval to the planning or town council at the November 6, 2025 hearing. So these things have been discussed in the public light. I came in October of last year and had recommendations that apply to the Army Corps requirements and Bureau of Coastal Management's requirements. I also am familiar with this field. In college, I have a published article about implementing wetland boundaries and setbacks and buffers. So this is something that is very familiar to me. I can understand some of these distances, but can see where it can conflict with interests of private property. So staff are ready to engage in a very productive conversation about this and to see how we can protect our wetlands, but also protect rights.
Thank you very much. And he has done a lot of research into this. Jay and I met before this meeting.
Motion to discuss.
Motion discussed.
Do we miss that?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
no,
Yes.
yeah, that before.
Okay, I wasn't here, sorry about that.
There wasn't a motion.
I didn't have one on the
Yes,
floor, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
All is good. Now, Jan, I went over this with Dan, and I have these comments here, we tends to use, a red pen, Kelly uses, digital with red spring out. So you can tell where they came from. We had a bunch of questions, that, actually mirrored many that Dan had. This is a model legislation, by the way, from a group of lawyers who are very good. They're fantastic. They defended this town before, but this isn't their area of expertise. And a lot of it does not fit all into all. So we had a number of changes or questions that we couldn't answer. For instance, on 523, 153, 231, which is your page, I think it's gonna be 60.
It's 39.
It's 38.
30.
38.
38, okay, so, yeah, got it. Wildlife refuge, wildlife sanctuary, and natural preserve wetland buffers. We came up with the birds of prey. And our Romaine retreat is more than 200 feet from town of Wallendale, so it is not affected by this. Did anybody on the committee think of anything else besides birds of prey that? Why we have this thing in here?
Paper name.
Well,
Wildlife refuge.
Yeah, that's across the intercoastal
but here, it
waterway.
doesn't say necessarily within, it says adjacent to or within 100 feet. Well, adjacent to just means next to.
It can,
right?
100 feet doesn't.
But or-
Cross the intercoastal.
Or 100 feet. It doesn't say 100 feet is the rule. It says adjacent to or 100 feet. Am I understand that right, Dan? That adjacent to means beside, and the entirety of the intercoastal waterway is beside the Cape Romaine wildlife, which would mean for every house on the intercoastal waterway, they have to be 215 feet away.
With
Am I
this
wrong?
proposed recommendation by staff, the critical area line would be enforced. So for anywhere where there's a critical area line that's delineated by BCM, that's the line that would be assessed for a wetland setback.
That's like the OCRM line that's 35 feet right now.
Yeah.
That we want.
So the Tidelands critical area will go out and delineate the upland boundary of the Tidelands critical area. From that line is where we would assess our setback depending on what happens with those numbers.
Okay, so, but you say that there's a house on the intercoastal waterway, and the intercoastal waterway is adjacent to Cape Romaine wildlife. So the people that now have a 35-foot setback from that line would now have a 200-foot setback from that line. Is that how I read it? Plus the 15 that was added down there in letter B, number 1.
That is not the way that staff have interpreted this ordinance, nor have we applied that requirement to properties on the intercoastal.
Nor have Jay, we don't interpret that one.
Well, I mean, you might not interpret it that way, but what happens when somebody else has your job in a month or a year or 10 years? That's what I'm looking
I
at.
agree. But yeah, so staff, there was actually a property that was looking to build on I'll reference it in here, it's a non-conforming buffer, and it was an undeveloped single-family lot. And they were permitted to construct their single-family home using the 35-foot buffer requirements that were in place at the time of subdivision. Per this ordinance, and that's how staff applied it. Now, if there was a new subdivision off of the intercoastal waterway or anywhere where there's a critical area line, the general buffer requirements would come into effect. Without a true delineated line of where the Cape Romaine National Life Refuge starts and where the critical area ends, it's hard to enforce that at a staff level. Because then we would be enforcing a buffer off of an imaginary line.
Mhm.
Whereas a critical area line is something that has been flagged and delineated, approved by, a licensed delineator and the state for us to say, yes, that's where that delineation is. Regional area can change dynamically. So it's hard to enforce that aspect, and similar to the riparian buffers. I think, this is a model ordinance. There were versions of this model ordinance that apply to other areas more generally, and it was adopted by the town with these things in, so that's something that we should consider about, where that jurisdictional area is or where it isn't.
Right, and as far as I understood, the adoption of and the getting it from the South Carolina Environmental Law Project, it seems to me that South Carolina Environmental Law Project maybe is over here in terms of their conservative, being conservative. And, real life maybe as it is now is over here. And so they picked the one on this far end. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows they just presumably picked that so they can have something on the books so they could start enforcing some of these rules, knowing full well that we would land somewhere in between. And this isn't something that has been picked by the council because it's the best thing. It's just the most restrictive thing. So let's start there and work backwards so we can get something on the books ahead of time to be able to start enforcing some of these things after having a first reading. That's how I understand it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the case.
Yeah, so the first intent of the adoption of this ordinance was to take South Carolina Environmental Law Project's efforts on this in different coastal communities and bring it here to the town. Of course, in the application, staff have noticed different issues with that strict application of what was adopted. Members of the public have addressed that directly. So, there needs to be the reconsideration. So we, staff are thankful that town council has reopened the discussion on this ordinance because it is very important that we get this right.
Exactly.
To protect private property, but also our wetlands, which are very crucial for all and all.
Okay, let's get off that and yes, it came from town council. Do we have anything on the land besides birds of prey? That is a wildlife sanctuary, natural preserve or law? Sanctuary, refuge, or wetlands preserve?
Is the question based on the fact that maybe this could go away? Is that where we're going with this question?
That is correct.
Okay. I don't think there's anything else on land that I can look up.
Anyway, my action is not to make it go away, but there's idealists this is an ideal universal act. And many of this stuff isn't here. So like we have a mountain. That we have a never mind, we don't have mountains either.
So, James, to your point, staff currently interpret this as one way, the way to avoid some of the, confusion here is we set jurisdictional boundaries for these different buffer areas, so that's why in my recommendation, I gave the example of riparian buffer. That's really only the Wando River, up there in the northeastern or northwestern corner of the town. Where would staff apply the wildlife refuge, wildlife sanctuary, nature preserve buffers? If someone owned a lot that was out in the creek in the middle of the wildlife refuge and they wanted to build a dock out there or a pier head that extends out there that, the town may have purview under, that would apply here. But a lot that is across, the intercoastal waterway, I think would be a bit excessive for that requirement.
And we could put that in,
There's only
Right.
one pond out there, we should say this, King's Brand. I have a King's Brand on my property, by the way, too, it stretches back, and I own the Martian line, but my neighbor owns part of that soil crossing. He made it into a permanent, sanctuary, not really permanent easement, and it no longer belongs to him, it belongs to the state. So we have no property development, I'm aware of things across that intercoastal law.
That's the case.
All right, now, local, state, national park and wetlands buffers. We've got a forest, Francis Marion National Forest. We've got a local park. We've got a Charleston County park that has yet to be developed. We don't have a state park anywhere near here, do we? No, Cape Propane is federal, but it's not in Auburn.
What's the Palmetto Trail? I mean, it's not technically a state park, it's managed by the Conservation Foundation, but
Yeah, this is a state park.
but it's on Allendale property, so wouldn't it be local?
it's on private property. A lot of it's on, a lot of
I
it's
guess
on
when it
private
goes to, obviously, when it goes to our park, but. And some of it's on the national forest property.
I think this just illustrates the fact that this needs to be more specific
Yeah.
about what we're talking about. We don't need to be debating what all these things mean. We need to just say, if we want to have a buffer off the Palmetto Trail, say that.
There you go.
Right.
Well, anyway, that's where we started, Jay and I started out with, is this, a lot of this stuff doesn't apply to us.
Sure.
Well, that's what we got. We got a model legislation and we're all in off. Anyway, a riparian buffer. And as I told Dan earlier, we have two folks within Allendale on 15-mile road, and there is a move afoot to persuade more of them, as has occurred in Romaine Retreat, to join the town of Allendale. So this is real. Okay, if we leave this buffer in there, but this is real. And the two above it aren't real. We just don't have them around here. Well, they use some colorful language. I'm not going to share this with you, but we've basically come back with 35-foot total now, we've come back with. And talking then maybe 50-foot total. But that's buffer and setback. Total, you don't add them together. You don't add buffer to setback, that's what they did in this thing, but that is not how Charleston County does it. It's a total distance, and you can debate on how much of it you want buffer, which is natural landscaping, and how much of you want setback, which can be your yard. And that line is variable, it depends on what you folks feel like this should be a natural buffer, and what you folks feel like should be part of a yard with the restrictions that you can't put impervious surfaces on this part of the setback. You can put paths, ways to get to the water, those sorts of things.
Where were you finding I'd be interested to see the bit where it talked about the buffers versus the setbacks. Is that just roof elbows?
Down in law.
Okay.
Look it up.
Yeah, I just meant was it in this ordinance any, because I didn't notice it, I just where I missed it.
Yeah, so in the section 153-231 wetland buffers and setbacks, presently, a general wetland buffer would have a 75-foot setback with an additional 15-foot setback, or excuse me, 75-foot buffer with an additional 15-foot setback, total length of 90. What the chairperson is recommending is it would be a 50-foot total area or total setback with a portion of that.
Oh, 50 foot total.
50,
Yeah, buffer and setback together.
yes.
Correct,
Correct, so instead of them being two separate things,
Well,
I
was
think
J and I. Right now, it's 35 feet.
Mhm.
That's it. The state of South Carolina has all sorts of recommendations, as do every group out there that goes for conservation. But the minimum wildlife protection buffer from University of South Carolina and NOAA is 50 feet, which is where we came up with 50 feet. They also recommend much larger ones for various things, but 50. That's how we came up with the figures, and we are currently 35. DNR recommends. Department of Natural Resources recommends last week 50 to 100 feet. We came up with 50. So we took the low end of that, but that's what SCDNR says now.
Is that for critical areas or all wetland?
From the critical line of all wetlands,
All the
right, from the critical line of the wetland,
But it's a 50-foot total.
right,
I got it.
and it's from the critical, so those who are in critical line, though, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it would be any delineated boundary of the wetland.
Mhm.
So 50 feet off of that with a variation of setback and buffer.
Right,
The critical area, the critical line is a tidally influenced
Yes.
line,
Correct.
which is not necessarily the case with everyone. So I have some clarification on what we talked about.
Well, the non-jurisdictional for sure, because they're very seasonal.
But it's
So-
like,
Yeah, so I think your clarification is we have a general wetland buffer, which covers critical area and also our freshwater wetlands, which are two different delineation paths. Anything that is tidally influenced would be the critical area line, anything not can be delineated by an individual.
And we're saying 50 feet off both of them.
And so I believe the modification would be to alter the general wetland buffers, which incorporates jurisdictional, non-jurisdictional, or critical area wetlands, unless otherwise outlined in this section. So it would be a 50-foot total setback, and then a combined buffer within that of,
We were thinking 25, 25, 30, 20, something like that. We gotta somehow break it up. You gotta have a natural buffer there.
well, sure, you still got existing houses that could be 35 feet from the
yeah,
critical line.
that's the point I'm about to make up, we've probably got 100 houses that are 35 feet. From this property line, and if a storm came and they were damaged below 50%, people wouldn't be able to rebuild on the properties. This is extremely onerous and extremely restrictive. And what's wrong with 35 feet? It's been working for a long time.
so I will just make sure I can clarify on that one. That degraded structure that's defined here and shall not be rebuilt without a permit. I do want to make a distinction there that degraded structure within the buffer area.
Can you tell me what line you're on so I can find it?
Yeah, so that's page 45 and 48. It is C of section 153-235, activities prohibited or exempted. And then it is C, prior non-conforming uses, activities with structures. So 3 would cover the structures damaged 50% or more, as defined here, which is a graded structure, shall not be rebuilt without a permit. That permit would be obtained through the planning commission as proposed tonight, at the recommendation of town council.
On the same footprint as their house was before, at 35 feet from the. Right.
They would just need a permit to rebuild,
Mhm.
which would be approved by this body, as they understood.
And what about people who already have lots on the water that were planning to build their house 35 feet?
So they would have a non-conforming buffer as outlined in this ordinance and as staff have previously implicated.
Tell me that in feet.
So if someone had a subdivided lot that was approved, recorded and legal at the time of adoption of this ordinance. And it's 35 feet, if they can't meet the requirements set forth in this new ordinance, they would be held to maintain at that setback,
At that 35 feet.
at that 35.
Since your grandfather's in.
Yeah, I
But
understand.
there is a need to incorporate additional language to make that more
For sure.
concise and clear. Matt and I have reviewed this ordinance and that's how we've applied it to real world for existing lots. Now, new lots is completely different. The subdivision of new lots after the enactment of this ordinance, or right now with pending ordinance doctrine, do have to meet the new requirements, which some individuals in the community do see a much larger change. Future folks will see also that larger change, but if the subdivision was approved with these requirements, they can always come later and get a permit application through the planning commission as outlined here. But those parameters need to be refined to avoid objectivity and just be subjective to the law.
To going back to what you just said, so you're saying if we make this new rule and it is 50, and somebody wants to put their house 40, you're saying that they can. Was that what you were describing, they can apply to? Is that where this wetland impact becomes?
The subdivided lots would have to have the new requirements. If they can't meet those full requirements and they'd like to move in that setback area, they can apply for a wetland impact application. That hasn't been tested yet here in the town, so staff has been advising applicants to keep all options open, site configurations in the event approval or denial.
So we're trying to encourage them to be 50 feet away, but give them the opportunity to be closer if they want the money.
Presently, that option is here.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's to the point of everybody's idea of protecting wetlands, that they can just pay their way into them. Not to say that I agree with 50 feet, because I don't. I think it should be shorter, but our wetlands are important unless you pay us money, is what I read into that. Right?
So that's why staff recommended that the fee be adopted before the enactment, because the fee should cover cost of this application. If staff are going to be required to post in the posting courier or put a public notice up for these applications, it should be representational of that cost. If staff are gonna have to consult with a private delineation service or facilitate that service.
Yeah.
That should be incorporated in the cost, so staff do recognize that and. The application should be seen as an opportunity to reward and not overly restrict. But to your point, it should not be used to allow people to pay to play.
So what's the point in having the setback so far away if you can override it, you know?
Yeah, so that's why I recommended refinement in those two different application processes, because it is unclear. The wetland impact to staff's opinion would be something that is taking place within the delineated wetland, whereas an action may be taking place in the setback or the buffer area. There's different ways that we can look at the metric of being, or percentage allowed within the setback area, or percentage allowed in the buffer, where we restrict buffer access and encroachment in the setback is allowed through permitting, but those things really need to be discussed and kind of worked out at a planning commission level, but also at a community level, so people can really understand what is taking place with these ordinances.
Well, remember, we've got a new council. And we had a change in the council 2 years before that. Because the proponents of the town don't like what's going on in this town. And no one likes driving down CD Road. Laws have changed and have. So there's nothing sacrosanct, and by changing the setback is no different than anything else. It can be done. Maybe it should be, maybe it shouldn't be, but say this is the way we've done it.
I understand.
Doesn't make it.
It's a good point.
And it is important to consider that with these applications, that the planning commission would be acting in a quasi judicial capacity. So we really should consider some refined criteria for approval or denial. Because we do have lots of different lots in Allendale, some of them have larger wetlands, some of them don't. Some wetlands are interconnected, some aren't, some are man-made, some aren't, so it's just a matter of. You know, we really need to refine those efforts because, you know, a decision made by the planning commission can be contested to the circuit court. And then any portion of the ordinance could be held as unconstitutional or not allowable
Yeah,
based on that recommendation, and we would avoid the intent, which is to protect wetlands here.
that seems like a tall order in the time that we've got remaining for this evening.
Anyway, what Jay's put in here, he will be here at our next meeting and, when we will be talking about this again, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And, said we have to be very careful about takings.
But what,
Takings, which is what happens when. Well, classic is the town condemns the property because they want to build a playground there or something like that. Yeah, that's when he was looking at these 200-foot buffers and 100-foot buffers and so on. And I agree with him there, but I don't think 50 feet is out of the question. I think that's reasonable. And he does too, but I'll let him express himself as that comes up. As we are now, and how you suggest we proceed, because there are too many things in here that doesn't have to be found.
I'd be interested in seeing a poll of the council as to what. Everybody believes is a reasonable number if it's not 50 feet, or
So-
if it is 50 feet.
From what I'm hearing is that there could be an idea to potentially workshop with town council. Now, I wish legal counsel were here tonight because. Just because of the duality of the planning commission and town council, we have to remember that there should be some separation of power there, so. Whether we can directly talk about this, we have to confirm with Matt to make sure that we're following all of the proper legal requirements, but. I think to your point is, you know, need some feedback from town council on it. I think that would be where more, you know, merited, but what the planning commission may want to consider is, again. Making a deferral on this to allow a longer review time of public and also staff, but again, we're held to our 30-day requirement, so, you know, I think. With this ordinance in particular, the other ones, there's areas where we can make sure that we get them within the 30 days. This one, however, I know a previous mentor in Georgetown County has been working with SEDS delineators, different developers in Georgetown County since October of last year, if not earlier than that, to refine this for Georgetown County. And I think this effort is important for all in all, but there is a lot of time and study that should go into this and making sure that we get it right.
Should be yours person.
That I'd actually be able to make, but,
Yeah.
you know, I will just say that, you know, I think there are a lot of professionals in the field that can see the importance of this, but. You know, it's best to hear it from members of the community, because I think they would have the biggest, impact of this ordinance.
Well, that's what council's gonna be doing, this public hearing, but, a number of the ordinances that we have changed have gone back to council and basically been significantly rechanged. So if there is a way that, we in a workshop, joint workshop, and the first meeting we had at Lion Systems was a joint workshop.
Yeah, that
We
would
met with council. We're gonna have to talk this thing through because we got some very significantly different ideas.
Can you shed light on the current situation? 35 feet is the setbacks from the OCRM line. Right? To build, and what's the buffer at the moment?
For existing lots, it's 35. For any new lots being created, it would be a 75-foot buffer.
Well, I just mean currently what it is before this, well, before that thing went through at the first reading.
So again, I don't want it to be too confusing for legal non-conforming lots. It's 35 feet for any new lots created after the enactment of this ordinance.
Yeah,
Or
going back to
time of application, they would have to
the
conform.
first ones are the ones I'm talking about. A year ago, 35 feet from the critical line where you could put the building, but where was the buffer before that?
There was no buffer.
So you could do whatever you wanted, right up to 35 feet.
feet, period.
Okay,
Yeah, now we're talking about 50 feet, maybe, period. So it's.
right.
But. Did it go through a second reading?
The ordinance 2025 42 did go. First planning commission, public hearing, second reading. So what we have in effect
Is
is,
the order.
it's not this version, this is the red line, but there's a separate version that is essentially the same substance. In it, the substance has not changed, distances, nothing like that. There's been some rearranging, some new wording. But besides that, the distances have stayed the same for what was adopted last year for what's being
So
proposed today.
35 plus 15
Is what was
is
approved.
the law.
Yes, that came before the planning commission? What on earth was that?
September 15th, 2025.
Yes,
How in the world did that?
yes.
That's insane.
Anyways, it was,
Yes.
it'd be very helpful to meet with council. Because someone's gonna have to, we can't just be sending these papers back and forth with districts. And they've got the final word, we understand that, this is the first one.
I like the idea of getting together with them if it's legally allowable. And what would that motion be in this case now? Defer it to a joint meeting?
Yeah, I guess it would be a motion to defer, recommendation to town council to defer action on this ordinance until a joint workshop can be scheduled to discuss the issues.
Pending
Before
legal.
anybody makes a motion, I have a couple of points I want to make. Good. Because council can do whatever they want on the sixth, they might not defer it, so I want a couple of things on the record. Number one, Dan, you were talking about the approval criteria for these permits that would come before the planning commission or wetland certifications or whatever we're calling them. I completely agree that they are not good criteria, they are way too subjective. And I think you could argue that they are impossible standard. The proposed disturbance will not adversely modify wildlife habitat or otherwise jeopardize plant, animal, or wildlife species, will not harm the public interest. You could argue any application that came before us would do one or more of those things. So theoretically, nobody's getting approved, right? So I think we need objective standard, measurable standard. The second thing is, y'all were talking about rebuilding degraded structures, damaged by more than 50% of their value shall not be rebuilt without a permit. I think we can add in here, an existing structure can be rebuilt on its same footprint. And then it doesn't matter what the setback is, because that sort of grandfathers everybody to what they have today. It's an easy fix, no matter where we end up with 50, 35 feet, whatever the buffer is. So, I have other suggestions, but it sounds like good. Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about this.
How soon I wanna kiss your getting good night? 8:13.
So in light of that, and I've got some suggestions too, could we make a motion to change it and meet with them? I mean.
If we're making a change, I would have a.
Yeah.
I would, if you're gonna do that, I would have two separate recommendations, so one
Right.
to defer with these amendments. And then also separate recommendation to further defer it for and recommend a joint work session with the town council. And we'll have the legal clarity too.
Question for you, David, and y'all got together and landed at the 50s, was that to replace all of these, the 50s, the 75, the 100 and the $200?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you, I didn't know which one you from.
We didn't understand the hundreds and 200s and millions.
It's a lot of different numbers. One other question I had about this thing is that. This 50%, where, this is so long, I can't even find myself. That the grading structures,
Yeah.
it sounds to me like we're turning Orlando into an HOA with that, that's was my first read on that. You know, I don't like how your fence looks, tear it down and rebuild it. That's why everybody moved to Orlando, because it's not HOA Orlando, you know? And that seems very overreaching and extreme and Nazi, for lack of a better term. I didn't like that. So I don't know if it was for sure want that to be added.
I'll just strike that from
point of clarification on that. So in our present zoning code, we do have a similar requirement to this that's in effect for non-conforming uses and structures. So the 50% is still in effect in the overall zoning code. The comments are merited on that, but I think that is currently something we have in place. It's not degraded structure. It's referred to non-conforming structure. So when we're considering and talking about grandfathering, we need, cross language. It shouldn't be differing in two different sections of our code.
And what's the difference between degrading and non-conforming? Describe non-conforming, we haven't understand that.
Non-conforming would not meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance in effect in present. So, whether that's a fence, whether that's a dock, whether that's a house, bulkhead, a septic tank, drain field.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's simple, and there's a state rule on it, 50%.
So there's some, so that there's the 50% compliance for flood code. So if something's damaged up to 50% or more, is generally governed by code. That's a building standard. Town can enforce that as a zoning standard for non-conforming uses, like if there's a rundown, shack or something, and the zoning is changed. Sounds like this is no longer conforming use here. You gotta tear it down or rebuild it or figure out something to do with the lot. So that is the standard zoning practice.
The state, right?
So would it, once it's enacted, would you just start driving around calling out ugly house? I don't understand, I think there's certainly a lot of places that are.
It is a merited comment, so. From my time at the State Bureau of Coastal Management, we did damage assessment of structures following a hurricane event. Where we would review a structure and say, okay, it looks like it's minor or major damage. After that, it would trigger to go to an appraiser. That appraiser would come out and review the structure in its entirety. That is submitted to the individual. The individual can then send it one back. The average of those two is taken, but that's not here. So I recognize that there are additional steps to be taken and probably should be, but those really need to be fleshed out.
Right, it's concerning when I read something like that, and then also the town council says, we're gonna try to get these people help with their roofs. I mean, there's probably a whole lot of houses that aren't 50% sturdy. But there's families that live in those houses, this is dangerous stuff to be adding in here, whether or not it already exists or not, adding it in here again and just reintroducing it. Is something that could hurt a lot of families that are struggling to get by, and sadly living in a place that's not 100% perfect. But it keeps them dry and keeps them warm, that's where I'm going with those.
All right, getting back to this, what were your two recommendations? That we proceed forward with this?
Well, based off of the planning commission, if there were any proposed amendments that you would like to incorporate it. And there was also the need to defer and see like a joint work session. I was stating to put those as two different amendments based off of the planning commission. It's up to, if you would like to have those.
Vote on any amendments here, but I would like the joint session. And then defer, we're gonna have to do that, there's way too much in here to change. That's what's to spend the next 2 days, so.
Yeah, it would be for everyone now,
So we're gonna defer on this. With their, if they allow us to, and they not, and we would like to have a joint session. We can formally request that if our lawyer agrees.
Staff can also make recommendations at second reading for additional consideration for an ordinance if it does not change the scope. So some of the things that staff has proposed tonight will also be proposed to town council if they don't accept the deferral or ultimate adoption. This is one clarity.
Well, thank you for that. We all.
Yeah.
But before we vote on that, it sounds like that is an option that they could say, we're just gonna go for it. And that's a big risk that I think we're taking without putting in any of our interjections. And I wish there was a separate way to do this. Can we defer it until the next meeting coming up this month? And flesh some of these things out before we send it to them just vaguely?
So staff would be open to discussing with different members of planning commission separately about this topic to kind of put together some different feelings and thoughts. So when we meet together, we have a little bit more of a conjoined effort that staff can then provide to everyone where we can meet on certain things. The staff will note that there is a preliminary plat that will be open for review at the next meeting. It may take up some time for that discussion, so just as a point of clarity that, we already have the septic ordinance coming back, potential to bring the tree ordinance back, and this one, staff do recognize the importance here, so I think I like that idea of if we wanted to defer to next week, I can facilitate some of these comments and generalize them and bring them back so we can find a better document for this and ultimately recommend something before deferring it.
If some of us can come to staff in a quantity that's not a quorum and bring our considerations and our concerns to you in individual groups or whatnot, to not be above two people. I think that's a great idea, or one at a time, whatever it happens to be.
Staff can make their schedule available.
Thank you, staff.
Well, just to note too, the next scheduled meeting is February 23rd, so that's Monday.
Yes, I'm aware of that. I think that I would prefer more time to give you something to do because I am unfortunately aware of our executive session, which will take place and planning call, and we may spend a significant amount of time on that. And if we've got these three ordinances,
I'm sorry, we
gonna
don't
be a
need
long time.
any more than we have to, but in theory, we could set up a third meeting at the end of February before council meets.
So another option is staff are currently talking with the Homestead Extension about hosting a septic community education session. That would be on March 2nd from 4:30 to 6:30. If planning commission would like, we could entertain an additional meeting after that to discuss strictly one ordinance or multiple, or to better facilitate our time. If there's good discussion about septic, perhaps we discuss the septic after that educational session, or staff would be looking to that consideration.
And what day is the subsequent town council meeting? Would that give all of us enough time to get things written down and present to conceptual way?
The regular scheduled town council meeting will be the first Thursday of March, which was
So not long after the second. Yeah.
But we have 30 days to make our recommendation, so does that mean that if we haven't made a recommendation, then it would not appear on council's agenda on the fifth?
correct. And there's also a public hearing that has to be scheduled, which is 15 days, so.
Right.
The planning commission could defer within that 30-day window. And as we talked about with the tree ordinance, town council acknowledged that deferral, but depending on where they may be going with some of these, they may not honor the deadlines.
Yeah, you can't advertise a public hearing on the fifth. Right now.
Correct.
Yeah. it's
Yeah.
limited.
So it wouldn't be on that and potentially a special meeting if they requested.
So theoretically, it's going in April unless they have a special meeting, but we still have 30 days. To make our,
from
today, to
Like-
make our recommendation.
I thought it was 30 days from the previous council meeting. I didn't do something that. Okay.
30 days from when planning commission originally
First takes it up. Okay, that's great.
So we have some time, I think, this point. So I don't think we need to do it.
And to note, the septic tank ordinance needs 30-day public notice. And the other ones only need 15-day public notice.
We will start off our next meeting with our executive session and the plat, and then we will go with what we have moving forward, then our topics. So the lighting seems to be the lowest hanging fruit.
I will say that we did get slightly off track of the topic that we are discussing, so we're still on the wetlands.
Yeah.
We're on the wetlands ordinance, and there hasn't been a motion on the floor with what the commission would like to do.
Defer, you want to mention,
Well,
future meeting.
well, I think we probably need to say when we're gonna defer it to, right? So we need to try and, we can't just say we're gonna defer it to sometime in the next 30 days, I don't think.
Well.
It should be
we didn't do
purposeful
that
to-
With the trees, we've had.
But yeah. Right, but we asked council to defer it. With the wetlands ordinance, we are deferring it ourselves so that we can recommend some modifications to it in case town council doesn't want to defer it any longer. They've already had first reading on all of these, which to me says we're ready.
Second reading.
Well, no, that one's already passed, but all of these revisions, the wetlands ordinance revisions, have they had first reading? They've had first reading, so council wants to move on. So I mean, that's what that
I'd like
says
to
to me.
get on the trees. We can try.
Sure, but going back to what we've been talking about,
Where are we gonna have the meeting? Just give me something concrete, not ideas.
Well, we need a date. We need a date in the next 30 days.
March second, there'll be a meeting in here from 4:30 to 6:30 about septic systems. So if we bring septic and wetlands back that day, that could be a good opportunity to get a lot of community engagement for folks who are already here. If the planning commission is open to that, so the meeting would have to begin after 6:30.
That's something good. But yes, public hearing what we're talking about, not a give and take, this wouldn't be an open public meeting.
It would be a special planning commission meeting with a dedicated public comment section that we require.
That's one of the second.
I'll do the second, yeah, I can do that.
So I'll make a motion that we defer this discussion of the wetlands ordinance to after the septic discussion on March 2nd. We'll take it to a special meeting.
Second.
I can't make it on the second, but I'd be happy to provide some comments before then.
But our English won't be written.
I'll listen.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed. So I would shape a motion to adjourn.
Okay, before adjournment, just so staff are prepared to propose the correct agenda for next meeting. Just clarity, so the septic ordinance will be carried over from tonight to next Monday, the 23rd. Correct. The lighting ordinance is going to be in for Kelly and I to review. And we provide new edits
For next week.
for next week,
Okay.
or was that the
Our next
recommendation?
meeting was what we were hoping, it was going to be very straightforward.
Okay, so
Arguing with Ellie is a waste of time, so we've all figured that out.
So septic and lighting will be that next week. The planning commission will also be taking back up the tree ordinance. An individual that is providing comments to planning commission before will be present to engage with planning commission about.
The diameter feet.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I've been talking to a few different arborists in the community, hopefully to find one that will be able to attend. And then finally, there will be a preliminary plat up for review by planning commission.
And the executive session. That requires timing because we had an executive session a number of months ago in which we dismissed the public as we have to during an executive session, and it was colder than whatever outside. And we do not want to do that to our fellow citizens. Their cars aren't warm, I mean, where do they go?
Well,
So what do we have? A place?
There is a conference room, that's what I was about to say, there's a conference room that you can adjourn to, because that has been done before with the BZA. They adjourned to the conference room.
Just as long as we don't strand these people in the cold. I really felt bad about that.
We'll make it as warm as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Was this for the motion for the workshop?
No.
But it is, this plat has already been approved by the planning commission previously during staff's assessment of the site design. The vested amount of lots changed with the moratorium. In fact, the lots that are currently being constructed on was not approved, so they have to come back for amended approval.
And we have some leeway that has to
Three days for what that discussion would look like.
Okay, so March 2nd is the only topic would be the wetlands ordinance?
Yeah,
And the septic, you said you might add that, because it's directly after the public.
That was gonna be my question. If you're having a public education event on septic, should we put the septic?
We should produce that. That's why.
Well, Dan said that, you said that earlier, but you could put both.
well, no, that's why he was clarifying the motions for all of the ordinances, because it was motioned and seconded for the septic tank ordinance to be discussed on February 23rd. Same with the lighting ordinance. Okay.
So, you know,
But if,
amend my motion to we discuss the septic and the wetlands on the March 2nd,
After this,
after the septic. Class, training session.
So I believe the original approvals were to defer for staff to review these certain ordinances. I don't
Until after March 2nd.
until after, so. I think the best way for us now, as we're discussing it, is a new motion for future agenda items. So next week, would be the lighting ordinance that we discussed tonight. So, and then March 2nd would be wetland and septic.
I would probably redo the recommendation for ordinance 2026-05 because it's been motioned and seconded to defer it to a specific date. I would redo that specific motion instead of voting on future agenda items.
And that was the subject.
Yes, that was ordinance 2026-05.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we defer consideration of ordinance 2026-05 pertaining to water and sewage disposal to a special meeting on March 2nd.
Correct.
Yes, that would be amending that previous recommendation that we voted on.
So this is a motion to amend, and now I second, right, and now we vote on it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
But we're procedurally correct.
Just so I'm clear, are we talking about septic again?
Yes, we're talking, yes, so now based off of that amended recommendation would be to defer it to March 2nd. So then now on the March 2nd agenda, you will have septics and the wetlands ordinance. And then only on the 23rd, you would have the lighting ordinance in addition to the plat, the preliminary.
Tree lighting.
Yeah, tree lighting.
Okay. The last thing in there is, can we formally ask Mack's opinion on the joint workshop with council, because I think that's the only way we're gonna change this ordinance.
Might not be necessary, but we can figure it out.
If it's advertised
Yeah.
as a public meeting, I'm not an attorney, I practice that, but I don't know of any reason why we couldn't have the 22.
We have council agree.
Oh, sure, but
Okay.
I don't think there's any legal reason why we couldn't.
Your point to duality, was that just because that's common practice, or is that because that's a legally binding duality?
Just because, you know, the planning commission, town council in different spheres, town council has the policy, planning commission approves recommendations. Sometimes when you get intertwined in that, it could, affect planning commission's ultimate recommendation decision. So it's just trying to stay within our box, to make sure that we're following the procedure that required.
We do.
I understood.
The county council doesn't come here and tell us what to do, that's state law, and we don't go there and tell them what to do.
Mhm.
But similarly to the comp plan, joint working sessions are something that have been done, so we'll just take a double look at it to make sure that we stay within our box.
Good. A motion to adjourn.
Let's make a motion to read.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
This should get good night. I'm kidding you, but.